Welcome to Harvest to Pour, the business of beverages, with your host, Matthew Shipp. This is the podcast for all of those who are involved in the agriculture all the way to the distribution of beverages. And now your host, Matthew Shipp.
Hello and welcome to Harvest to Pour. I'm your host, Matthew Shipp, and today I am here with Josh Hamilton, the owner of the Rack House Kitchen, Wine, Whiskey in Cottleville, Missouri. And I'm also here with Josh French, the Director of Beverages and Hospitality. How you guys doing today?
Great. How are you?
Doing really good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So how would you go on to describe the Rack House? At first, I tried to like, oh, it's a restaurant, but it seems to be much more than that. Would you kind of like to go into what the Rack House is?
Yeah, so we kind of, well, you don't want to be everything to everybody. It can be a little difficult. We do have quite a bit for a lot of different people. So over 300 whiskeys on the bar, really nice beer program, just about 100 wines. We do slushies, mixed drinks, just got a nice little bar program started with the bartenders and their input. But then we also have patios, and we've got a banquet room. There's a separate cigar lounge with a separate smoking area. So between all of that and then what the kitchen is able to produce with Chef Clayton, we really can kind of hone a lot of things in and be able to provide quite a bit for a good amount of people.
Do you guys also have a club here as well?
Correct. So there's two. One of them's in the cigar lounge, and that's just a humidor rental that people do. But there's also the wine club. And so that's a quarterly club, and it works out nicely. For $45, you get 2 bottles of wine every quarter. So if you happen to be traveling during the summer or the kids have sports and you just kind of get caught up, you're not stockpiling all these bottles. You're just coming to pick up 2 bottles, and you can have one here whenever you come in and dine.
Oh, that's awesome. You also have a whiskey club, or is it?
There is, yeah. So I guess there's 3 altogether. I apologize. So we're coming up on our 60th person to finish.
Wow.
What that really means is they've gone through and tried 100 different whiskeys that we've got lined out and numbered throughout our menu. Like I said, with over 300, almost 350 now, that's pretty easy to line those guys up. But the best part is at every 25 whiskeys you finish, we'll give you a little reward just to kind of keep you coming back. So you'll get a complimentary flight, one of our signature barrel-aged Manhattans, T-shirts, rocks glasses. At the end of it, you'll get your own 1-liter oak barrel and get to take it home and have as much fun as you can with it.
Ah, okay. Well, that's really awesome. So we're going to get more into the fact that you have hundreds of different whiskeys and wines. We're going to get more into that in a minute. But first, I want to talk to Josh here and ask him, how did the Rack House get started? What's your story about that?
Well, we opened in 2014, and at the time we were basically we opened as a winery. So we had wine, Missouri wine, and we had a little bit of foods. We were doing paninis and flatbreads. We weren't considered a restaurant at all. Our bourbon selection was much smaller. I think we started off with maybe 30, and we eventually grew that to 50. And then we changed over the years. In August will be our 10th year. So at the beginning, and Josh came on very early. In the beginning, we basically thought, hey, we're going to do this one thing. We're going to do local wine, and we're going to do a little bit of food, and that's what we're going to do. And then based on feedback that we're getting from guests and regulars and people coming in, we started to change a little bit. And in 2016 is really when I would feel like that's when we really went full on in as a restaurant. And then our whiskey and bourbon selection grew from there. And it was, probably building up after that point a couple of years to get to the point where we would consider ourselves one of the premier bourbon and whiskey bars in the metro area.
Wow. All right. So 2016, so you really like to listen to the community, and they gave you
Yeah. We kind of had a running joke amongst the management staff that we switched our business model every 6 months. But the thing is, we really kind of were. And it was just on feedback as people would come in. They'd be like, hey, we'd really like to see this or that, or you guys should really do more for food. I'd stay here for dinner. And we just kind of evolved that way. And really, I feel like that's part of the reason that we've been around so long is because we've adapted to what the people in this community are really looking for. And then we became a staple, and now they're coming back on a regular basis.
So what were some of the challenges you ran into and this constant evolution? I mean, it is tough to make change. Change is hard sometimes, but what were some of the pieces that you ran into that really challenged you?
Well, I'd definitely say early on was the food. I mean, you didn't want to sit around and wait an hour for a flatbread and panini and things like that. So a lot of times you can have the most beautiful restaurant, you can have the best plating, you can do all the steps of service right, but if the guest just isn't feeling that vibe, isn't feeling kind of the ability to come in, get what they want, get another, we're a small community here. So this wasn't what they wanted to do the entire night, maybe. We've turned into what they want to do the entire night. But early on, we were so fresh that they just wanted to see what we were about. And now we were kind of holding them hostage to a point that they had to be here to get their food. And so listening and developing that's where we decided. And John was able to, expand the kitchen. And we literally put square feet to the building and were able to make those adjustments. And so that was part internal need, and that was also part of what the guests were looking for. Well,
so did the guest and also your staff, which helped push you towards these changes?
Well, I think there's a little bit of both. I will say I came from a background that was not Missouri wine related. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those that I kind of had to relearn some wine and some of the verbiage here for some of the local wines. While I've enjoyed them, it wasn't something that I had to put to memory. Mm-hmm. And so a chef that we had at the time and myself, I guess enough little chirping in John's ear was enough to push a little forward and kind of reevaluate what we were putting out for the consumer, for our guests. And with that, decided if we're going to make one change, we kind of need to do that overhaul. And so it was those bits and pieces, like you said, about every 6 months that we were just kind of reevaluating. And we had staff that was willing, really willing to help with that. But it's a mix of the feedback we were getting from consumers, from the guests. It was for the staff. They were just as frustrated trying to calm a guest down potentially or keep them and also not get them too drunk to stick around. And so it was a big split between who was really driving that force. I think a little bit of the chef and myself, but so much of that consumer was, well, I can go somewhere else and get Missouri wine. Why am I here for you? And that was the kind of that eye opener of why. Let's make a reason why they are here. And that's really what started that development into what we were able to provide and what we are today.
So what did some of those meetings look like, especially when you're coming to this realization of, as you just put, the why I'm here? Prove to me why I need to keep coming back. What's, is it a kind of a 60-40, 80-20, a staff to customer, or what does meetings look like initially? Yeah,
so the feedback comes when we're doing kind of a lineup pre-shift, just to kind of let the staff know what's coming out of the kitchen, what changes might be happening if the seasonal vegetable change, things like that. But towards the end of those, we always want feedback. And we want feedback whenever staff gets it. That also happens whenever a manager like myself or any of the other ones on staff go to those tables and are actually talking to the guests and saying, how was your flatbread? How was your panini? How was whatever they're having? How was your wine flight? So those things all kind of culminate into the answers that we need. Didn't know we were looking for them sometimes, but it's just those things that's where I can then take it back. We have a weekly managers meeting where we can then give that feedback directly to John. And there may be a time where, if I'm not here on Saturday mornings or on Sundays when we do our brunch, I may not hear some of that feedback for some of those brunches. So the manager that is there can give that feedback to us, and then we can have that discussion. Does it make sense, mm-hmm. right? Because if we're switching our business model, the overhaul on that alone is pretty big. And that's both an educational standpoint for staff to know what we're going to. Don't forget, we're not doing this anymore. We're going this way. As much as a financial burden that it comes with making the adjustments from having nothing but local wines to really expanding that. With that, I think there were about 20 local wines that we had. We overhauled that pretty quick into about 60. So bringing that much new product on is big.
Yeah. So as you stepped up your customer service, it seems like you were getting better feedback as to what needed, more specific feedback in the positive direction of what needed to change and what didn't.
Yeah, that was big. And what was nice was like I said, we had the staff that was willing to learn with us. But then as we started developing the menu, we had full-blown entrees on there. Those are just a different price point than what a panini or a flatbread's going to be. So that then started drawing better staff, in my opinion. While we love the staff we had when we opened, there's still some on staff with us still to this day. They took a little break in between, but it's those types of things that helped draw a better staff. And then with that, some of that staff came with their own background and their own recommendations. So while it wasn't necessarily something for the consumer, they had an idea on how we could better execute internally different things, whether that's how to do side work a little more efficiently, how they learn better, which maybe I didn't think on how to teach someone about wine this way, or about food. Terminology had to be learned. Some people didn't know what certain sauces were. So that was a big, big change to develop that way.
Because this is really important for other businesses to hear. Say again what was starting to attract better staff.
The fact that we had a price point that they felt they could make a living off of, with the knowledge so they could better sell the products, and that comes with both sides, kitchen, from the front of house, and really it's the ability for them to give feedback, understand that they're heard, and then see those changes. And it's not a see those changes 2 years from now. It's a see those changes pretty quick. And if we're changing the business model every 6 months, we were making those adjustments pretty quick.
Wow. All right. And Josh, have you seen these similar changes, and anything you want to add to that?
I don't know. You pretty much covered it. I mean, you're just talking about challenges. I mean, one thing was, like we said earlier, like we didn't start out with a hood system in the kitchen, so it was one of those things where we're going to our chef at the time have been like, okay, we now want to do steaks and all these entrees and all this other stuff. And he's like, well, we have to have a hood system. We have to have more refrigerator space. And so we basically had to retrofit this building, in addition just to the expansion we did, but retrofit this place to be able to put in more cooler storage and different things. So it really has been a challenge. I would not recommend anybody starts out this way, but like I said, we had one idea that when we got started of what we wanted to do, and we just had to make those changes.
Yeah, your adaptability is something to be said for. That's really amazing. And the fact you had that staff there to support you, and it seems like you were also almost encouraging their ideas as well.
Oh yeah,
it's like,
absolutely.
Hey, bring it in. I know that there's some have the well, this is my baby, so thanks for the ideas, but I'm going to do it. But you really opened up to that.
We're very open to feedback from both our guests and our staff. If somebody new starts here and they've got a background in what we consider more refined dining or upscale, especially those, we're going to go back and say, hey, what have you done in the past, or places you've worked? What did they do that you would like to bring here? And it's an open discussion. Like, we don't necessarily do everything that somebody suggests, but if they're like, hey, I used to work somewhere else and we had this great cocktail, everybody loved it. Now, we're not going to probably just flat out copy it, but it might inspire us to think, okay, what else could we do with this? Same thing with guests that come in here. We've developed part of our menu just based on guests literally saying, hey, I really wish you guys would carry this or that or whatever. And we had a gentleman that comes on a regular basis. He likes a specific type of scotch. We didn't carry that. And so I started talking to him like, hey, listen, obviously you're coming in on a regular basis. If you want this and it's within, and it was a reasonably priced scotch, and I'm like, I'll put it on the menu. And, so now he gets to come in here and enjoy the scotch that he likes. It adds to our menu. So I know we're moving the product, but it also gives that opportunity for other people. Otherwise, we might not have even ever considered it.
Okay. Yeah. That's your ability to, like I said, take people's feedback in, both customer and staff. Kind of reminded me of a small project that I was on. We were actually, they needed better merchandise shelving. And instead of just asking an architect to come in and do it, we took the people at the ground level that were working there, and they started concepting their own stuff. And then we designed a visual workshop around that. And they all chose the best aspects, pulled together a master. Then we ran that. Then I spent 3 hours in there running it by customers.
Right.
And they had that. Now, in the end, we're not able to implement it immediately, but they had that blueprint. And since they had that blueprint, it was almost like the blueprint didn't matter what the design was. It was the confidence they knew they could move forward with it. And so the shelves they finally did, once they did install, don't look a lot like the design they came up with, but once the money came in, they could move on. They had the confidence. So that kind of reminds me of when those two people work together like that, you can get a lot done.
And I feel like that's where we've developed our base of regular clientele that come in here too. I mean, just think about it. If you go to a restaurant or really anywhere and you're sitting there at the bar or you're in the cigar lounge and the owner's there or upper management, you have direct access to them and you're just kind of, hey, I'd really like to see this or that. And the next thing you know, your idea is now being utilized by that establishment. I mean, that locks you in. You are now not only just a guest or a client to that particular establishment, you feel like you're invested as well. Mm. And you're more likely then to go out and talk to other people and bring them in as well because you feel like you're part of the group.
Oh, yeah. You're thinking my language here. Yeah. It's once that you have that buy-in, it becomes theirs, it becomes yours,
right.
You know, and you're going to come back, you're going to take care of it. All right. So we're going to come to the core of the podcast here is I like talking about the harvest to pour journey. Now, usually I'm talking with a producer, so of a wine, whiskey, beer, coffee. But in this case, this is going to be really interesting because your harvest is your true harvest as far as the beverages go is unique. And I want to talk a little bit like, you know, what are you looking for when you pull in one whiskey over another, a local over a national? What really makes you say, hey, this is something that needs to be here to share with clientele?
Well, it's multifaceted in terms that we're looking for guest feedback. At this point, we have so much on the bar. I mean, we have literally built shelves coming off of shelves to make sure that we can display as best we can because you need to see the labels. Sometimes people aren't sure what they want to drink. And so instead of looking through a list, now 3 pages long on our menu, it might just be easier to look at the bar. And if that label doesn't grab to you, if it doesn't speak to you, or if you're not recognizing something, you might be a little disappointed. And you may be looking for that inspiration, especially if it's something that might be limited or allocated. That might be a little more. So there's a little bit of that we really have to look at what is selling, what isn't. And so that's just running sheer numbers at the end of a week, at the end of a month, at a menu cycle, things like that. But we do that with cocktails. We do that with our food. We see what's working. We see what isn't. While we do change the seasonality of things, you know, our crab cakes haven't really gone anywhere, but the sides and the sauces and things like that do change. And that's kind of the way we look at it on the bar as well, is if it's not working for us, let's move it. Let's feature it into a cocktail and then we'll find a replacement for it. Or sometimes we don't. It just becomes a point where there may have been so many new things that came out on the current menu that we have to find a home for them on the new menu print so that they can be seen, because people still reference that, the menu, that we've got to get rid of something. And so we're forcing something to come off the menu at that point.
All right. I was going to ask you what some of your challenges are for sourcing. That's definitely sounds like one of them.
Yeah. When we're looking at local, when they're coming to us, they are clear and ready for production-wise. And very rarely do they have an issue. It seems like we have more of an issue with some of the national brands just because they've got shipping issues, where somebody local, guy last week just brought his whiskey by and we just needed a bottle. He does direct sales. He doesn't have a big corporate deal with anybody. And he just sampled it on us one day. We liked it, brought a couple things in. When we need more, we send him a text and he shows up with it, usually within 24 or 48 hours. So I'm not waiting on a shipment coming out of Kentucky or from wherever. He just has to find time to make it over to me. And that's what's nice about some of these locals, is that they're just as invested in the community and want to see that, right? So it's got to work for us in order for us to bring it on. If it's, some crazy, maybe sweet whiskey, something like that, that we don't have a big call for, there's not a big need, because it doesn't do the maker any good, and it doesn't do us any good to take up shelf space and not move their products. So it does have to find a balance. When it comes to wine, It's kind of a little bit of seasonal, right? We're going to bring on a few more whites during the summer, spring months, and maybe a little heavier red when we get into those colder months here in St. Louis, St. Charles. And so that's still a time where we have the ability, and I have the ability to talk to our vendors and say, hey, this is the hole I'm looking to fill, and I need it done in 3 weeks. And then they bring me some samples, and sometimes they leave them with us, and then that's when I get to go to our regulars and say, what do you think about this? I literally will pour them complimentary samples just to get their feedback. So again, as much as they had early on opportunity for feedback, they still have it to this day to help influence the menu.
So I was going to also say, after you do the harvest, typically is how do you make your product yours? Got into this a little bit, how you make unique leaders. People are coming to you with very unique things, local, not local, and what you can get, what you can't get. But now they're coming to you. So that is something very unique, I would say, for the customer coming in and say, hey, what do they have this week? And that adds on to it. There's another piece, though, that what I will talk about, what makes, I believe, the Rack House unique is your collaboration. You talked earlier on pre-shows about the barreling, and you almost have like a hub and spoke system here. People are coming into you, you're trying out other things, and you're almost unintentionally growing other people's products and their livelihoods by getting them time, really, eyes on their products. Talk a little bit about that, or either one of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll do various barrel picks with whiskey, and they'll do everything for us, right? They put the label on there, they do everything there, put all the liquid in the bottle. But when they ship those bottles to us, usually it's anywhere between about 150 upwards of 250 sometimes. Makers is really good. Maker's Mark does a really good job. We're on our 9th or 10th pick with them. But when those bottles come, they usually package the barrel that the liquor came from. And so that gives us a unique opportunity at 53 gallons to do something pretty special. That's a little too big since we don't actually produce anything here. And we thought, well, why not give an opportunity to those that can fill up those things? And really what that came down to were local breweries. So things like Third Wheel Brewing, Friendship Brewing, they've done a really good job at letting us kind of come up with the ideas. If we need to blend something into it, if we're looking for an adjunct to add into it, or if we're really just looking for the barrel and their beer to speak to each other and then pull it at the right time. The group over at Third Wheel had welcomed us graciously, and we literally were just what they call pulling nails. They're these little nails that you pull out, and a little bit of the beer starts pouring out, and then you just plug it right back up. It's a great way to taste. But there was one time I remember when Abby was still with them, she pulled and she goes, I've never even had a beer this fresh out of a barrel. She had just put it in 3 days prior. There was no need to taste it, but it was just unique to have that experience, to be able to see it side by side, exact same beer, brewed at different days, in 2 different barrels, but still what they could do. Beyond that, there's a barrel on the bar right now. The cocktail is called Buffalo and the Bee, and that is actually using local honey that was in a 20-liter barrel, dumped. We've used it for cocktails. Chefs used it back in the kitchen, and we sold a little bit of it when it was bottled. And then we just put Buffalo Trace and sweet vermouth in it. So it's kind of the base of what a Manhattan would be. We backed off, had to find a balance because the sweet vermouth wasn't needed in as much intensity because there was already some honey still kind of left in that. The other one's the chocolate Manhattan. That is actually using Upshot Coffee cold brew. So it's cold brew Kyoto coffee that Connor and his team put in that barrel. It initially was just over 3 years old as a bourbon Manhattan barrel. So once that was kind of ran its course with us, we gifted it up to Connor and the team, and they, for 8 weeks, just left cold brew Kyoto coffee in there. They dumped it, used it for their needs, and then we got it back, and we put a chocolate whiskey. It's still 90 proof Tennessee whiskey. There's nothing terribly sweet about it. It's bitter cocoa nibs that they use in the processing. We add a little sweet vermouth, and then when we tap it for the cocktail right off the bar, we add a little chocolate bitters, ice, cherry, and it's to your table.
Barreling cocktail. I mean, this is wild. That is awesome. But yeah, you just named off a lot of local in the area here in Missouri. Coffee shop, local breweries. So yeah, and well, then you also mentioned local distillery as well. So that is a way to. So do you have anybody? Has this system attracted anybody outside of Missouri yet?
We've had interest with maple syrup producers. Logistically, it just gets difficult to ship that barrel because you've got to ship it there and then you've got to get the products back to us, or at least split products so that we each have a chance to make something of that final product. So nothing that we've kind of ventured out of. We tried barrel aging our own cigars, so that was something that it did okay.
It's work. That's good. It's a good learn.
Yeah, that one burned out pretty quick. Yes, all purposes. Yes.
All right. So finally, I usually get to the pour. The pour is the marketing side. So other than word of mouth, you guys do any more marketing than that to kind of get yourself known? What else keeps people coming back besides your customer service, your unique, vast offerings of wines and whiskeys?
Honestly, it really is word of mouth. We do a little bit of advertising, through social media. Occasionally we'll do some print, or we've done some radio stuff in the past too. But really it comes down to that person who comes in here, has dinner, has a cocktail, enjoys something off Josh's wine list, whatever that experience is for them. And then they go out and they tell somebody else about, hey, I've at this place. It's called the Rack House Kitchen Wine Whiskey. It's the atmosphere, it's the menu, it's the whole thing. And then that's when their friend and the friend and family or whoever it might be is the next person that comes in. And that's really where we've grown. I talk to people all the time. Hey, how'd you hear about us? And it's one of two things. It's either they drove by here and they saw the side of the building and the name and they're like, hey, I was curious. I decided to come in and see what you guys are about. Or it was, hey, my sister-in-law was here with some friends a couple of weeks ago, said it was great. I should try it out.
Awesome. So getting back a little bit more into the open part of your business here, what do you say is your current most open challenge right now?
Staffing. I mean, that's just all staffing. It's gotten better over the last 6 months to a year than it had been. But obviously, with the post-COVID situation everybody was in, like staffing just dropped off the table there for a while. And it was just, we had wine club members literally doing dishes for us. We had managers and staff who had went on to other jobs and no longer worked here coming back to help us out. I know I did some dishes every once in a while. A lot, actually. Josh did too. We actually at one point had one of our food vendors, the U.S. Foods, our local rep, and then one of their upper managers who had cooking experience. We had them in here one night working the salad station and the grill. So we managed to get through a 2-year stretch of literally just patching together as many people or as many bodies as we could get in here just to cover. And the nice thing is that it has started to turn some. We are now seeing more unsolicited applications coming in where we can be a little bit more picky and choosy over, hey, you know what, this is a performance-based job. And so we need you keeping up with what it is that our expectations are in order to maintain that position with us. So that has turned a little bit, but that's by far the biggest challenge.
All right.
A little bit is going to be with just consumables. The fact that wine, there was the tariffs that were in place with things and just production costs because they're also having an issue with staffing before us, I should say. And that even translates to food. So just trying to maintain, an area where people can feel comfortable. This doesn't have to be the uber special night. This doesn't have to be a once a year type place to come. It is a big, big hurdle. And we're seeing that, whether you're at the grocery store or you're trying to go out to eat and have a good time. And if you've got the family and, all of that, we want to make sure that you feel just as comfortable because the atmosphere is here for that. That's what we've built from day one. That was really, translated down from John that hopefully I've continued to give with staff and that they can provide is you can come in with, a baby in the stroller, or you can be here on your, 50th wedding anniversary and you still will feel hopefully like your family because that's what you're stepping into with us is, we're all here quite a bit and, we're all seeing a lot of the same faces with our employees. We want to make sure that they feel like they've got a good home. And that's kind of how we use this is that it is something that your family when you come in and should feel that way. But we want to make sure that, got to balance some of that. And prices are unfortunately a reality for everybody.
Okay. Absolutely. So next is, where do you see you taking this business next?
I don't know. I mean, I think we've got
so much adaptation.
We've got a good thing going. People ask me on a regular basis, hey, I'd really like to see you open a spot here or there or wherever else. At this point, I don't really have a burning desire to do that. Honestly, staffing and costs have a lot to go into that because, opening an establishment, especially one like this, it takes a lot. And I don't really feel like we need to open a second or third location right now. And maybe down the road, we eventually get to that point. But right now, I enjoy what we're doing here. I like being part of this community, and I don't really want to feel like I need to put myself and Josh and some of the other people who are managers here, start spreading them over 2 or 3 locations, because then you start to lose that personal touch feeling when you walk in the door here and you see Josh, around the host stand, or you see Mike, behind the bar, who's, Mike's been a bartender here for a very long time, or the servers that we've had, Maggie and Ari and Lori. Some of these people that, like, you literally walk in the door here and you're greeted by people by name. They know what you like to drink. They know what you like to eat. They're getting your drink order. Like, they see you pull into the parking lot and they're getting your drink order ready because they know that that's what you're going to have when you get in here. Huh. And that's the stuff that we would lose if we started spreading ourselves too thin. So
let me ask this question a little bit differently then. What impact do you want to make for yourself and on the community?
Well, I mean, we're not done growing, right? Yeah. So we're adding to our patios, trying to make that a little different scene out there. John's allowed myself and then the bartending team to come up with the cocktails as we see fit, as we are getting asked for. He's got the complete ability on Chef Clayton to create a menu that he thinks is going to work, and kind of taken a hands-off approach on that aspect of it to give us the ability to create those regulars, right? So we're a golf cart friendly community. Obviously, we want to see more people that want to come down to us, that people have been here for 12, 15 years that still come in to this day, that have never been in besides that first time. And I want to make sure that they're coming back. It's going to help everybody. It'll help us continue to grow to maybe get to that point of having a second or third location if we get to that point. But the idea that, we could have been here for almost 10 years now, that in itself, I think, helps the community. In fact, that this building isn't sitting vacant. It isn't being turned over. You don't know what you're getting whenever you walk into the new thing that this may have become. And we're in a really good spot for a lot of those things to be able to continue.
All right. So a couple questions more. And this one can be hard. Could be easy. What I'd like to know is, for each one of you, what is your favorite beverage?
I always say, what's the weather like today? And it's St. Louis, so if you wait 5 minutes, it'll still change. Yeah. It's one of those things that there's nothing on our bar that I haven't tried, that I don't dislike. Personally, I like a good Manhattan. Okay. We do a barrel-aged version that we let sit for at least 30 days. And to me, if you can do it right, it's got a great balance. It really, really works. And you can make variations to it, kind of like we have. You can flip it around and change the ingredient ratio and make it a little softer to start the night out, or just completely overhaul the ingredients and make something really unique with it.
John?
I drink bourbon.
Well, I see a lot of bourbons up here, barrels. You got one that sticks out now, right?
I usually drink Woodford Reserve. That's my favorite. It was one of the first bourbons that I really got into. And honestly, back when we first started this in 2014, I wasn't really into bourbon and cigars as much, not certainly to the point where I am now. But Woodford Reserve was one of the first ones that I really, took the time to, try it neat, or try it on the rocks, and what flavors am I getting out of it, or how is this different than, mixing it with something else, of course. Mm-hmm. And that's really where I'm at now. Like, I've tried a lot of the stuff in the bar. Obviously, I just don't. I like bourbon. I pretty much stick to it. I'll try a few things every now and then, but if I'm going to pour something for myself, that's what it's going to be.
All right. That's good. I like it. Do you guys have any upcoming events or promotions you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, so we actually this last weekend finished up a winemaker wine dinner. So we actually had a gentleman from Italy that made the wines that we were sampling that night. So that was a ton of fun. We've got another one of those coming up in August. A little more details coming up in a little bit, but we'll have a wine dinner series probably coming June, July, August, and then we'll build out a few more as we finish out the remainder of the year. Take a look. We always try and have a wine or whiskey tasting. We did one earlier this year, a new startup company here locally. We did a cowboy hat making. Well, he wasn't making the hats here. He was shaping and steaming and fitting all of those, but we paired that up with a wine and whiskey tasting. And it was just a really fun, and I've never been to one. My vendor had never been to one, and we were their first public event. And so we've got fun stuff that'll be going on. We're looking to do a pretty big tasting later this year, wine tasting. And so we're just lining what that's going to look like out. And we'll post all of that. We'll have that on our social media, website. That's usually the easiest way to find a lot of what we're doing with that.
And I'll obviously have all this in the show notes, but what is your website?
It's going to be The Rack House, KWW.com. That just stands for Kitchen Wine Whiskey.
Kitchen Wine and Whiskey. Okay. All right. And actually, I do have thought about one more question I should have asked at the beginning. Where does the Rack House name come from?
In retrospect, there's a lot of things that I would have done different with the knowledge base that we have now. Rack House, we basically started that based on, if you're down in Kentucky and those big warehouses where they age the barrels, they're either called rick houses or rack houses. And so we thought, hey, we're going to be really clever and we're going to call it Rack House because, we're going to have some bourbon and we're going to have some wine. And that's where they would be aged at if we had a big facility. The unfortunate thing is we get people very confused with us being mostly barbecue. And then the other issue that we have is the name Rack House Kitchen Wine Whiskey. I occasionally we get people coming in here who say, hey, I've driven by here dozens of times my way to and from work for the last however months or years even. I never came in there before because I thought you guys were a liquor store or basically like a wine shop. They did not realize that we are a restaurant, that we have from scratch kitchen, seasonally updated menu, just in general, just an upscale casual restaurant. And so in retrospect, that's where the name came from. And we probably should have picked something a little bit different or been a little bit more specific that we are an upscale casual dining restaurant.
All right. Well, I'm glad I got that out.
Yeah.
So now anybody listening, it's a restaurant with a lot of cool drinks and a lot of different seasonalities. Come out and check it out. Definitely. Guys, this has been a great lesson in just listening to your customers, listening to your staff, being able to adjust. That can be scary and you don't know if that's going to be the right decision or not, but the ability to step forward and make that. Now that you've been here long enough, the community is turned even towards like the people bringing their product to you. You guys saying, great, let's make it even better and then turn it back out. And just a great way, unique way to look at doing business. I really, really appreciate your time. There's a lot of great lessons to be learned here. And yeah, again, thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Matt.
So much. We appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
Thank you for listening to Harvest to Pour, the business of beverages with Matthew Shipp. Check the show notes for our guest contact information and connect with Matthew Shipp on LinkedIn today.